emphasize. It's even a challenging topic for public authorities as well. A lot of businesses struggle to maintain privacy because one, there's a lot of issues which I'm going to go through. I'll show you how we've implemented it, the operational side of it. I'll show you how to do a gap analysis. I'll go through some key definitions as well as part of that. I'll go through some of the challenges organization face, some of the challenges around privacy. I'll summarize the session at the end. And then obviously you'll have some time as well to ask any questions. In terms of questions, I don't know if you want to type your questions in the chat as we go along. So then at the end of the session, I'll be able to revisit all the questions and try and answer them to the best of my ability as we go through the session, if that's okay. But if you really feel like you want to interrupt or jump in while I speak, please feel free to sort of jump in and ask your questions as I go along. Yeah. So with that being said, I'm just getting to presentation mode. Okay. Okay, so yeah. So what I'm going to do first, I'll introduce myself. I know Emmanuel said a little bit about me. So currently, I work with a few businesses. I do audits, data protection audits, PSI audits. I advise on compliance, data protection. We do managed services, penetration tests, vulnerability assessments. We do quite a lot of a huge bucket of services that we provide around data protection and cybersecurity. In terms of my background, I came from a help desk. I used to work on a help desks across Europe as a IT service operations lead, just managing help desk. And then from there, I went into hacking, became an information security officer for a global organization around Europe, delivered a few data protection projects. And I went down the route of becoming a cybersecurity consultant, basically just giving advice to, again, small, medium enterprises around the country. In terms of courses, hobbies, contact information is all there. I don't really pick up my phone because I'm quite busy, but if you send me an email, I'll possibly respond to email quicker than I'll respond to a phone call. In terms of hobbies, football, reading, and traveling. So, first topic on the agenda today is key definitions. What's privacy? You know, what is privacy? I think we need to understand what privacy is before we sort of go any further. Privacy is basically a state where no one is disturbing you, you know, or nobody's stressing you. So I'll give you an example. So Emmanuel has a house and decides to put a wall around it, a fence. Yeah, he's doing that for the sake of privacy because he doesn't want to be disturbed. He doesn't want to be observed around his perimeter. This is what privacy is. So when you share on a daily basis, we share information with Facebook, TikTok, all these different social media platforms. You're always sharing your information with these different companies. But what do they actually do with your information? Do you guys know? Are they protecting it? Are they sharing it? Are they using it for marketing? This is what data privacy is. And when it comes to organizations will collect a lot of information as a business. I don't know what companies you guys work for, but I believe you collect information on, you know, on staff members, on your customers, on your investors, on your clients. You know, if it's a medical school, you probably collect records of medical records of people. All this information, basically, how do you protect? How do you build a framework? How do you build a way within your organization to be able to maintain that information so it doesn't fall in the wrong hands? This is what this session is about today. So another key definition that you tend to find in privacy is what you call data controllers. Excuse me. So data controllers is basically anyone that determines the means in which personal data is being processed. So for example, if you are a business, as an example, and you collect personal data, you become a data controller. And then you have what you call data processors. So your data processors is anyone that you share personal information with. So all your third parties that you share information with. Sorry, just spare me 1 second. Let me get some water. So all your data processors is anyone that you hire as an organization to process data on your behalf becomes a data processor. So it's always very important, to identify your processors, because again, there's protection that you have. You have to do due diligence. You have to assess your third parties. If you're acquiring a new system in the HR department, to organize holidays, to organize payments for your employees, how does that company look after that information that you share with them? This is where data processors come into play in data privacy. But I'm going to go through all of these as I go along into the session, just for the interest of time. Data collector. I came across this in one of the regulations in Uganda. Who's a data collector? So anyone that collects personal data becomes a data collector. It's pretty much the same as a data controller. A data subject is basically any person's information that's being requested becomes a data subject. So for example, your clients, your employees, again, your investors, these are data subjects. These are some of the key definitions in privacy. What is personal data? What is personal data? Personal data is basically anything that identifies you as a person. So your name, your email, your phone number, that's basically what personal data is. So anything that can identify you as a person, that's personal data. Your address, your home address, that's your personal data. And that's what you're trying to protect. You basically don't want it to fall into the wrong hands. You don't want people to know where your email address is. You don't want people to know where your home is. You don't want the whole general public to know where your information is. So this is what personal data is. So data security is basically techniques or principles that you use to protect personal information. So data security is actually different to data privacy. Data privacy is how you process personal data, how you handle it, how you share it, how you destroy it. Every bit of information that gets processed by businesses, it has a life cycle. It comes to one end where you have to get rid of it and delete it at some point. There's regulations in place that say you have to have a retention period, which defines how long you keep that information. If you go over that retention period, there's actually sanctions, there's penalties or fines which can be imposed on the organization. So it's very, very important to understand all these different key definitions within privacy. But other things that you can consider. So for example, consent. What does consent stand for in privacy? A data breach. What's a data breach? That's something that you can consider. The privacy impact assessment. What's that as well? How do you do a risk assessment on privacy? So all these are key definitions in data privacy. Before I go any further, I'm going to jump into how you gather requirements for a privacy program. This is always the starting point. So if I'm doing business, in Uganda, and let's say I offer Uber services in Uganda as an example, how do I understand what privacy requirements do I need to be obliged to demonstrate that I'm accountable for my business? All you need to understand, every country in the world, privacy now is actually a legal requirement. If you go to Uganda, there's laws around privacy. If you go to Kenya, there's laws around privacy. If you go to the United States, there's laws around privacy. So that's always the starting point. You need to look for the regulations. You need to look for the legislations that define privacy in those countries. So the other factor as well that can influence privacy requirements, it can be a governance decision that the business makes and say, me as a business that because I'm doing business in Uganda. I want to improve my data security in Uganda. I want to improve my data protection in Uganda. So what can we do to improve that? I want to be able to make sure that I know what data I collect, who do I share it with, how long I'm keeping it for. That could be a decision. And because of that, then you start looking into the different frameworks that they're going to implement within your organization to protect that information. So that's another factor that can influence the requirements. But most importantly, most cases, it's always due to contractual obligations. Because obviously I'm doing business in Uganda, again, as an example, I might have clients that say to me, you need to be able to demonstrate so. You need to have a data protection policy. You need to have a data protection officer. You need to register for so and so. So these are some of the key factors that actually influence the requirements for data privacy. This is always your starting point. But what I'm going to show you first before I shoot off onto the next slide, I'm going to show you this website quickly. I'm just going to jump off this slide. So if you go into Google, I'm going to share all this. I'm going to share all these resources. I'm going to share all these links, everything that I'm going to show you today, all the documents. I'm going to share it with you so you can use it for your reference. This is called the DLA Piper. This is the Global Data Protection Laws of the World. This is a useful website as a starting point. So if I'm doing business, I don't know what you guys work, what companies you work.
Excuse me, Stan, you are not projecting it. Can you share it?
Bear with me. Why am I? So bear with me. So let me share. Stop presenting. It should. Okay. Let me share again. Window, and you should see the entire screen. Yes, screen 2. Right. Can you see it now? Is that better? Can you see data protection laws of the world? Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So this is always a starting point, and this is also an indication of how strict certain countries are in the world. So you see red here, heavy, you got robust, you got moderate, and limited countries. So for example, if I'm doing business in Uganda and I want to find out what regulations I need to comply with in Uganda. Sorry,
Joseph, please mute. Joseph, please mute.
Kindly proceed. I've muted him.
Yeah, perfect. So, sorry, just to start again. So this is always a good starting point to sort of understand what regulations you need to meet as a business. So if I'm doing business in, let's say 4 countries, if I'm doing in Africa, so if I'm doing business in Egypt, Uganda, Kenya, and let's say South Africa, I need to find out what regulations I need to meet with. All I need to do is just go on here. You can search by country, or you can actually click on the country itself. So if I click on Uganda, if that loads, it will actually show you. If you look here, it shows you the regulations. It says the Data Protection and the Privacy Act 2019. It says this applies to any person or any entity or public body collecting, processing, holding, or using personal data within Uganda or outside Uganda who's collecting or holding personal data of citizens in Uganda. This is how regulations work. So if I'm a business and I'm based in Kenya, but I'm collecting personal data of people in Uganda, I have to be able to demonstrate that I comply with this Data Protection and Privacy Act 2019 of Uganda. So this is where you understand the regulations I need to meet. So for example, I'm doing business in Uganda, that's one. If I go to a different country as well, so let's say if I do Egypt, they got really robust privacy regulations. If I just go there quickly, click on that as well. Yeah, so again, personal data protection law, copy that. Once you find those regulations, each country in the world has what you call a legal information institute. You know, even in the UK, we have a legislation.gov. It has all the laws of that country. This is Uganda's legal information system. All you have to do, you just have to find that legislation and its privacy. If I just open that, if I just click on that, it shows you the Data Protection and Privacy Act 2019. It shows you the application, who it applies to, some interpretation, some of the definitions, some of the key definitions that we went through today. As you can see, data subject, personal data, all that information is all there. Processing, definitions of processing. So all your requirements are actually in this document here or legislation. So I'll give you an example. If I go to, a good example will be retention of records of personal data. Yeah. So the requirement here is talking about how long you should retain that information. If your processing is come to an end, if a person leaves your organization and you got the personal data, why are you still holding that information? You need to have a lawful basis and say, okay, at this point, this is when I'm going to delete that information. These are some of the requirements. So the next step will be you've identified the legal or applicable legislations in the different countries that you do business. That's step one. You can put them on an Excel file. You say, this is a regulator, this is the country, this is how we're planning to meet that legislation. This is what it applies to. It applies to personal data or privacy or whatever. And this is the person in the business that's responsible for that as well. I'm going to show you that on the next slide. Then after that, you need to go on here and extract the requirements from these legislations. I'm going to show an extract which are done for GDPR. I don't know if you are familiar with GDPR. I'm going to reference a lot of GDPR, by the way. GDPR is a General Data Protection Regulation in the UK, which was imposed by the European Union on anybody that collects personal data of people within the EU area. Yeah. So it's actually one of the most firm and very, very heavy legislations in the world. Is very, very rigged and they're very, very serious. And the whole reason of it was to give people powers over their own personal information. This is what GDPR is about. But for the interest of time anyway, I'm going to jump out of this and I'm going to go back onto the slide quickly. Okay, I want to show you a different website as well. There's a website I came across before I come off there. Bear with me, this one here. This I came across this article in Uganda as well. Something that I want to make you aware of is what you need to be aware of. You need to understand your authorities when it comes to data protection in the countries that you're doing business. So for example, Uganda, as you can see, NITAU is the actual authority in Uganda which maintains the data register. And then you've also got the PDPO, which is the independent office, which is responsible for overseeing the implementation and enforcement of the act. It's always very, very important to understand these authorities and the support and the powers basically that you have. We have in the UK, we have the ICO. The ICO has a lot of powers in terms of they can come investigate your organization to see what you've done, what resources you've put in place, what processes you put in place, what technologies you put in place to make sure that you're actually complying with these legislations. And if you're not, you're actually looking at a huge fines, heavy fines. I'll show you some examples of the previous data breaches or privacy breaches which happened in the UK and how much money it actually cost the businesses. I'll go through that later on at some point. But yeah, I'll share this with you as well. This is a good read. You got your definitions. It summarizes some of the requirements from the legislations. As you can see, your controller, some of the definitions again that we've gone through, how to report, refusal of registration, what happens, data transfer, when you're transferring data across, records of data, privacy impact assessment, which I talked about, retention, which I was talking about earlier, child data. This applies to people if you're in schools and you're collecting personal data of kids under a certain age, I don't know what the cap is, it could be 18, it could be 16, 18 below, different countries, different legislations, you can basically look here and then read the requirement, extract it, and then find ways on how to meet that requirement. But yeah, just to go back onto the slide quickly. So I've showed you these two websites, DLA Piper, useful resource. You've got your Uganda Legal Information Institute as well. And then a quick article, which again, I'll share with you that you can have a read on. After you've identified these, what you want to do is you want to create a legal register. If you're doing business in different countries, just put your legislations here on the left, as you can see. Put the link to it or a document to it, background information on it, and the reason why you have to do it as a business. It's a legal requirement, is to protect personal data of people. Then how you planning to gain that? How you planning to basically demonstrate that you meet the requirements of that legislation? And then who's responsible in the business? It's always good to assign responsibilities in the business, because some of the sanctions in the UK, actually, there's imprisonment for directors of the business if they fail to provide the right resources for ensuring privacy within organizations. So this is how serious this can get. But just to show you, this is the overall different requirements for the Data Protection and Privacy Act for Uganda. So what you can do, you can extract all of these. I'm going to show an example. I'll put them in an Excel file. If I just show you my example that I created, just bear with me. I'll load that up quickly. So this is GDPR. As you can see, this is reference to the actual legislation itself. I've extracted the activities. So in terms of defining roles and responsibilities, you can do it in different categories. You could say, I've got a category for policies. I've got a category for roles and responsibilities. I've got a category for personal data mapping. Personal data mapping is just basically understanding your data flow within your organization. When you have data in finance, what does finance do with that data they receive? Are they sending it to payroll? So payroll can pay people's wages, people's salaries. What's HR do with that information they collect? What HR doing with all those CVs they receive? So that's what personal data mapping is. So this is probably an exercise, Emmanuel, that we have to see at some point and do this and try and extract the requirements out of the legislations and put them on an Excel file. And then from here, this is where you also do a gap analysis. So what I can do, first thing is, do we have a DPO? Do we have somebody in the business that's responsible for data protection? Yes or no? No, we don't. And then in your action plan or your roadmap, that could be your first action. Let's recruit a data protection officer. Second action, have we done a gathering exercise to understand what data we have? If we're not, where are we? No, we've never done it. Then again, that's your second action in terms of the roadmap. And again, you're doing that as well as part of the gap analysis. A gap analysis is basically just understanding where you are and where you need to be. It's as simple as that. So if you're not meeting all these requirements on the left, all you have to do is, again, just like I said, extract them from the legislation, put it in a document that makes sense, assign some reference to the legislation, have activities, and then give you some responsibilities in the business. And then you can define dates of when you actually want to do it within the business. But this is something, again, like I said, this is something that we're going to work on, me and Emmanuel. We'll probably do one for Uganda, something similar, which we can basically, use to basically improve that side of things. So if I just jump back onto the slides. So yeah, we've gathered the requirements. We know what the legislations are. We've gathered the requirements. We've created a risk register. Next step, gap analysis. I've gone through a bit of that as well. In most cases, when you're doing a gap analysis, it's very important to look at your previous audit. Have you ever actually done an audit on privacy in your organization? Have you had some externals come into your organization and say, you know what, let's look at what you do. Let's look at how you process, how you collect, how you retain, who you share personal information, personal data with. Let's look at all of that. What do you do when you get new technologies? Do you actually do privacy by design? Do you say, okay, we're getting a new application in our business, but what personal data are we actually going to be using in that technology? Is that something that you do? If not, again, there's a gap. That means you have to start doing that. The core due diligence checks. Let's check what we're going to be processing with that new system. We might be getting a new system in HR, again, to improve people's holidays. We might be getting a new software in the business, which we're going to use to a payroll system. Businesses, there's always different requirements. There's always requirements that are coming from the business. So you as privacy experts, you just have to look at everything from a privacy perspective and say, okay, what do we need to do to make sure that we ensure privacy by design or privacy by default? And this is basically what it is. But you can also use security frameworks. I'm going to show you one or two free frameworks. I see we sort of running a bit on time. I'm going to show you one or two privacy frameworks, which I'll go through. But yeah, that's a bit of information on the gap analysis. Step 3, that's the roadmap. Again, these are activities which I've showed you. You can define the different activities from the different requirements, and then you do a plan on how to best implement them throughout your organization. So for example, if I just quickly go back to your privacy framework, there's one that I saw, security requirements. So this requirement in your privacy regulation is asking controllers should secure the integrity of personal data in their possession or control of a data controller. So they're asking for technical organization measures. Yeah. So things like training. Are people actually trained on how to handle personal data? Is there encryption? Is there access control? Is there a need to know basis within your organization? So all these are different requirements. So you can do a plan and say, we will implement so and so in a short period of time or in a month as part of our project plan. So this is what our roadmap is, basically. Yeah. So if I just jump back onto that roadmap. So yeah, that's your roadmap, basically. Please, if you do have any questions on this as well, please put them in the chat. I'll come back to every single one of them. So I'm just trying to, because obviously with the interest of time, I'm trying to sort of go fast. And if I'm going fast as well, please slow me down. Tell me to slow down, I'll slow down for you. Okay, so what is the operational side of data protection? So obviously you've created your plan, you've implemented all these different activities, you've recruited a data protection officer, you've done a data mapping, you've identified your sub-processors, you've done an instant response plan to say if there's a data breach, this is what we're going to do. You've created all your privacy policies or your retention policies in your organization to say, this is the data that we have, this is the point that we're going to delete it. So you've done all of that. That's your implementation side of things. Now you've gone into the operation, the daily management of your privacy framework. You have to train people on it. When you buy new technologies, I talked about privacy by design. You have to make sure that you assess, what are we doing? Do we need to do a privacy impact assessment? Are we collecting too much information? Do we need all this information? You can review your third parties. You can go to people that you shared information with in the past. Look, do you have contracts? Do you have non-disclosure agreements in place to say, okay, you're handling our information, but how do you secure that information? Are you sharing with anyone else? You shouldn't, because if you do, you need consent from us, because that information belongs to us, because we are the controllers. You have people complaining, you have complaints, you're dealing with complaints on a daily basis. You can do data mapping exercises. You can report on compliance to the board. So you can go to the board and say, this is where we are. We're not compliant. We've got contracts. We have customers asking for this and that. That's your operational side of things. And then when you have a data breach, what happens? What do you do? Again, you have to initiate an instant response plan where you have to investigate the breach itself, how it happened, how you contained it, what's the impact on the privacy of people. If, let's say, if somebody hacked into an HR mailbox and they have a list of all your employees within your organization, yeah, and that information is accessible publicly, what's going to happen to these people within your organization? And then your pre-sale policies need updating. These regulations as well, they keep on changing. Your risk assessments, again, you're providing advice and support to different departments. I do this all the time where I get people from different departments. We're buying a new application. What do we need to do from a pre-sale perspective? I've got a questionnaire for them. What are you processing? Who are you sharing it with? Where is it hosted? Well, all these different questions. This is your daily operation side of a privacy framework. And in terms of maintaining a legal register as well, that screenshot that I showed you, that shows you, what regulations that you're meant to be complying with based on what area you do business in. Again, you need to update that on a daily basis. And that's your operational side of things. So I'm going to jump into how you sell privacy to non-IT people. I think the first conversation that you need to have with your leaders is a legal obligations. And in countries, if you're a global organization, if I just show you quickly, we've got 2 minutes left. If I just show you quickly, let me just find something. Let me just show an example of how serious actually privacy is in Europe. Data protection breaches 20. So bear with me on this one. Yes. Here we go. Right. So these are some of the biggest data protection breaches in the world. I'm going to show you the British Airways one, if I can find it. Yes. So this is BA, British Airways. This company is a big company in the UK. They were fined 20 million. 20 million, and this is the reason for the fine. So the fine was issued because British Airways handling of significant data breach that export private information of more than 40,000 customers over the course of 3 months. The ICO, which is basically similar to your NITA, intended to a level of a fine of 183 million for a breach because of a dramatic impact on the revenue earned by British Airways. This was because they never had the technical security measures to make sure they secure people's information online. And look how much it cost the business. There is also, this was a big one as well, Marriott Hotel. There was customers' information, VIP information, and they bought a business, Marriott Hotel. They bought a new hotel that they wanted to bring into Marriott Hotels, but they never did their due diligence to make sure that business is secure. There was a lot of customers' information online available. Imagine VIP information. The president of Uganda visited a hotel. That information is showing how much money he spent, how many people he went with, this, that, that. That information, that's breach of privacy. Then you think about court proceedings, lawyers, claims, all of that. It actually costs a lot of money to go through all of that. So yeah, first conversation is, this is a legal obligation. We need to get it done, because if we don't, there's sanctions. Then reputation damage. There's, right now, if you suffer from a data breach, if you're a big organization, so if you're a bank, let's say Stanbic Bank right now, if they suffer from a data breach in Uganda, what do you think is going to happen to the bank itself? People are going to lose trust in that organization. I'm not going to bank with Stanbic Bank if they're suffering from a data breach. Also, the data breach itself as well, to contain it, to investigate it, it takes a lot of time, a lot of resources. You lose your customers. It's something that you don't want. So this is always the conversation, that this is always a starting point to basically have when you're speaking to directors of the board about this. In terms of the staff, people need training. Make sure you don't CC BBC people in your emails. Information classification was highly confidential, was sensitive, was personal data, was what can be publicly available, what can be shared on social media. So this is the selling point of privacy within organizations. Okay, so just to finish off frameworks. There's three frameworks. I'm not going to sort of go into them because we're running out of times, but these are some of the frameworks. I'm going to provide the documents for these. ISO 27701. It's called PIMS. It's pretty much like ISO 27001 as well. So if you guys know ISO 27001, this is similar to that. The setup is exactly the same. If I could just find it quickly, I had it somewhere. Yeah. Let me just open. I just show you this. So this is your ISO 27701. Yeah, this is your PIMS. So this is actually an addition of the ISO 27001. As you can see, if you have a read of it, definitions are always the same. It shows you there. And again, understanding the context. So how do you apply ISO 27000? Look, the things I was talking about today, applicable previously legislation, that's always a starting point. Yeah. But I'll share this with you. But then again, it talks about security controls, HR controls, asset management, labeling of information, cryptography, securing your physical environment is also very important. Operational security, backing up, logging, communication, supplier management, which I kept on talking about. Make sure that your third parties are vetted. You do due diligence checks on them. You have agreements with them. You have contracts with them. And yeah, then you've got the privacy and the data protection framework as well, called NISA. I'll provide the information for that. Then you have the NIST privacy framework. The NIST privacy framework has you have the function, you have functional areas of it. Then you've got categories, and you have subcategories. So in terms of categories, you say identify, then a subcategory will be identify the applicable legislations or regulations. This is how NIST works. But what I'm going to do, I've got all these documents anyway. I'll send them across to Emmanuel. I have it here, so I'll share it with you guys so you can best use it for your reading. There's other frameworks in the US, in the UK as well, but probably don't apply to you guys. Okay. Just to finish off, in terms of challenges, just think about challenges around privacy. If you're a global organization and you're doing business in different countries, India, America, UK, Uganda, how do you harmonize? How do you bring all these global legislations and be able to demonstrate that you actually meet, or you demonstrate accountability as an organization? It's a huge effort. It requires a lot of resources, a lot of planning. How do you bring all these legal bindings together and actually make it make sense? How can you enforce it? So for example, if I'm in the UK, or somebody in Uganda is doing business with citizens of the UK and they suffer data breach, how does the UK government enforce that? General awareness in terms of knowledge. There's a lot of knowledge gaps. There's also lack of resources in the industry. Think about things like CCTV, the Internet of Things. We have smart this, smart that. All these things can impact privacy. Think about AI. Think about all that stuff as food for the station today. But just to sort of summarize anyway, what I went through is basically identifying your applicable laws and legislations, gather the requirements, creating a roadmap, implementing that roadmap, operation side of things, and basically maintaining it. Any questions? Does anybody have any questions for me?
Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question if you have any.
Sorry, I know I've gone through it very fast. It's just literally for the interest of time. But if you do have any questions, you can even put them in the chat as well. I can pick them up. And I can try and answer. I'm trying to find a meeting on TIA. There we go. Just bring that across.
Okay, we have about 3 or so minutes to close the meeting. Is anyone with a question? I have seen a couple of requests to one record and number two to share the presentation when it's done. We'll do both of those. But in the interim, if you have any questions to ask Stan or any clarifications you need him to make, kindly ask. Yes, Brenna, please proceed.
Thank you, Stan, for the presentation. My question is about APTs. I don't know if we get such a challenge in cybersecurity, how best can we handle such threats?
Advanced threat protection. What you can do with that? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
When it comes to advanced, I mean, what you have to do, you have to implement data prevention loss. Data prevention loss. I don't know if you're familiar with ISO 27001. There's actually a new control in ISO 27001 called the data prevention loss. Yeah. This basically you implement a way in your organization to try and monitor how information moves into the organization. For example, if somebody shares a file, a confidential a file that has a personal data or driving license, there'll be a notification which will sort of go into that inbox. But with advanced threat protection, it's always the best solution is always training people and also implementing technologies as well within your organizations that can possibly, pick up these advanced threats. Because again, when it comes to advanced threat, persistent, they're very, very persistent. The only way you can pick it up is through technologies. To be fair, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Brenna. Anyone else? Okay, I guess we'll get the questions in email as and when they come in. Brian asks, organizations with limited human resources who would best be placed to play the role of DPO?
So, okay, so for organization with limited human resources, who will be best placed to take basically is anyone that understands the knowledge of how to demonstrate, implement, maintain, and advise on data protection will be the best person in the organization. In most cases, like I said, this department doesn't make money for a business, and any department that doesn't make money for businesses, our decision makers don't like investing. So this will require a bit of training. So people will need to be trained on exactly what needs to be done because there's a lot of gaps in organization, exactly what needs to be done. So in terms of placement, I'll say anybody can do it in the organization, but again, they will need training. But in other countries, in our countries, for example, UK, you're actually not allowed to be a DPO and be and have a second job as well. It's called conflict of interest. And also, GDPR has specific requirements for DPOs. This is what a DPO has to do. This is who they need to report to, and this is the daily activities. So, yeah, basically, just person needs to be trained. It could be anyone, but they need the training. They need to understand how to deliver a privacy framework for them to be able to deliver for your organization, Brian.
Okay, thank you. In the case of, for example, my employer, sorry about the noise. In the case of my employer, the actual DPO is the head of IT, and only because, yes, we have limited human resources, and so we had to select someone who's a bit knowledgeable about the whole landscape of data protection. So the IT manager, in our case, is the DPO. Okay, thank you, Brian. I hope that's clear enough. Is there any other question? All right.
Yeah, well, I just want to find out. Thanks a lot, Brian. I just want to find out what exactly would be the requirements for a data protection officer in an organization. Is there any specific characteristic you want to look out for? Because this, it seems to be the case with us, what you've just described. The gentleman that the head of ICT became, and that's what the case is here. So, are there any special attributes that you would think best describe the right
Um,
view?
it,
Thanks.
it, to be fair, again, it goes back to my previous answer. Anybody can be a DPO in an organization, but what certain businesses tend to do, like Emmanuel said, they tend to place that role within IT. Yeah. But the role itself should actually belong in the business. A DPO should be within the business, maybe somewhere in finance or maybe in HR. But that person should just literally focus on data protection, especially for big organizations. I don't know how big your organization is because it is a huge effort. It is a huge responsibility. But in terms of characteristics that you're looking for, somebody needs to be able to communicate with people at all different levels because you're going to have to go from training people, your end users, your list administrators, to speaking to the head of finance and saying, look, we need an investment for this, or we need a tool for this, or we need to put a process in place for the organization to make sure that when we do suppliers. So you need somebody that's an all-rounder, great interpersonal skills, great communication skills, and obviously understanding exactly the requirement, giving them the right support, giving them the right training to be able to deliver for your organization. Because again, like I said, there's a huge knowledge gap when it comes to privacy. There's organizations in the UK here that are still struggling to deliver data protection, and data protection came in force in 2018. Does that make sense, Steve?
Yes, quiet, really.
Yeah,
Thanks.
you need to basically get somebody, you can get anybody in the organization, but you need to give them the right support, the right training to make sure that they deliver, able to communicate, bringing people together, and then you train them on privacy, and then they'll deliver for your organization. That's literally that's all you need. Anybody can, even yourself, you can be a DPO.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. There is a question actually someone asked me on message, and they're asking me if it's necessary to do annual privacy audits.
Yes, audits are always very good. Uh, Audits are always very good. When you do audits, when it comes to privacy, I recommend independent audits. Don't audit yourself because you're gonna cover up areas within your organizations. You're gonna go to departments and you're gonna ask questions and they give you false information. But if you bring external auditors in on privacy, they'll find out the right information. They give you information, the correct information for you to possibly go to your decision makers and say, look, this is where we are. We need some resources in. This is not right. This is not what we don't have pride. We don't have policies. We don't have a process in place for privacy. We don't know where our data is. We don't know who we share it with. We don't have contracts. This is you need these audits to be able to get what you need within your organization. So it's very, very important to carry out audits on privacy. Doesn't have to be once a year. It can be your first audit as a step to identify what you need to do. And then maybe you do it, implement 2 years down the line, then you do it in 2 years and say, you know what, let's go back, reassess what we've done and see where we are at the moment.
All right. Thank you, Stan. A minute for any other questions, if any, and then we can probably close it off. Okay, I guess there are no other questions. I thank you, members, for affording us your time to attend this training. We will have monthly trainings, and we target to have them on dates like this towards the end of the month. And so I will keep communicating to you guys. I'll as well send through a yearly planner on what exactly we intend to do when. And I hope you create the time to attend because we believe that for mostly the professional members, such interactions are quite educative. And so from us as an association, we will have a training every month, as I stated, but as well we have a physical interaction or training, where we will meet in one of those places where we can afford to be at least once every quarter. And we'll as well have a schedule for master classes for individuals who can afford to pay for them, as well as for companies. If one of your employers decides that they want help in a particular area, then we'll be glad to step in and offer the training. Um, Obviously, using the members who are part of the association, because the association, like we said, is member based, and so all the services that will be provided by you, the members. So I thank you very much for attending. I'll share the recording when it's ready. Uh, I'll send the link on your email for where you can access it. So thank you very much, and I hope we keep in touch. Thank you, Stan, for the presentation, and have a brilliant evening.
No problem. Thanks everyone. Nice to meet you all, and take care. Hopefully we touch base soon at some point.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Thanks guys. Bye now.